It's interesting that I put on this photo to start with on leadership, because there's the one place that I am not good with leadership, and that's in the home with my dogs. Like, they get away with everything. So if you're looking for that presentation, that would be Kelly's later, I'm told. Like, she can teach you about leadership, not me when it comes to those. That's 5 of my 6. They're I just adore them. And not shockingly, they all came from shelters, or with respect to the shepherd, she showed up at my house one day. And after really trying to find her house or her home, I just, and for months, decided she could stay. Okay, so we're gonna start off this presentation with a little game and a slide that says I'm really old. This was, and maybe some of you will provide me some support if anyone knew or ever watched the show What's My Line. Thank you, I really appreciate it. What's My Line played on TV from 1950 to 1975. And what they did was the panelist was blindfolded, and you had someone come out and they would say who they were and what their career is, right? And they would just ask them questions, and by that they would guess who they were or what their career was. So we're gonna play a version of What's My Line here. You're not gonna ask questions, I'm just gonna give you the answer. And whoever, just if you know who it is, just shout it out. I don't have any great swag, but I do have this wonderful cell phone holder, right? So if you shout it out, you get the cell phone holder. PetCo Foundation branding, right? Okay, here's our first clue. Ready? This is a job that will definitely strain your sanity and drain your ego if you let it.
Shelter director.
Great response, not the right answer. We're gonna keep going. Seems like everyone wants a piece of me. Yet many of the people I serve question my position or just don't believe in me at all.
Volunteer. ACO.
Nope, not yet. And those who do believe often expect me to do the impossible, rarely caring about what I have to do or go through to meet their expectations. And they all have expectations.
Animal welfare.
Not yet. Nope. Believe you me, having to smile and be jolly every day when you're wearing that same thick hot wool suit. Thank you, there you go. This is Santa Claus. We'll pass that on. Here, Bobby, do me a favor, hand that off to her. Give people exactly what they want, and ho, 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 everybody loves good old me. But miss 1 or 2 items on the list or forget to include the batteries, and you'd better be ready for the alligator tears, the fat jokes, the stupid songs, no cookies, the wet laps, the yanks on the beer, and the I could do Santa's job better than Santa. And that's only half of why it's not easy being Santa Claus. Obviously, you know why I use that example, but it's not easy being Santa Claus. No, it's not easy being Santa Claus, but in spite of that, I love what I do. People need me. They depend on me. We're doing something important here. And knowing that gives me the energy to carry the sack, lead the pack, and keep coming back. Sure sounds like a CEO, a volunteer, anyone in animal welfare, right? This is actually, it's a super cute book. Sometimes I like the simplest things when it comes to keeping me grounded, right? And it's a book called The Leadership Secrets of Santa Claus, how to get things done in your workshop all year long. And they have chapters like, finding the right reindeer and, sharing the milk and cookies, and a couple other ones. But it's really an awesome book. So I highly recommend it. Very simple. Okay, so as Bonnie told you, I consider it an absolute privilege to be the president of the PetCo Foundation. And one of the reasons it's because of the team that I work with. And there are 2 people up here, Sue Cosby, who's going to be speaking later, just has achieved incredible things in Philadelphia And she did them, when we looked at it at the foundation, she did them they had a high number of animals in intake and a very small budget. And they were achieving wonderful things. And then Lisa Lane, she, I think, is just amazing, an amazing marketer. And, you know, I think it's something that we're really proud of at the PetCo Foundation, is because our mission is really to help you all and to help create a life-saving nation. And it's really hard to do that job if we don't know what you're going through, if we don't know what you do every day. How do we help you if we don't understand what you do? And so I think we're super proud of the fact that so much of our leadership has been there, just like you guys are there every day, and we know what it's like. So I'm going to quickly tell you a little bit about, you know, who we are. I think people know us as, you know, you could do adoptions in PetCo stores. You know, PetCo Foundation offers grants, but we really see our mission as being a little bit broader, and that's really to inspire and lead change for animals in our country. And so often in animal welfare, we preach to the choir, right? So our mission is to preach beyond the choir, because we have to reach people that aren't currently doing anything, and we have to bring them into this cause, because we're not going to succeed alone. Our success is dependent on being able to bring them in to help us. We have the privilege of using 1,500 PetCo stores to enable us to do that, and that's really what we try to do. We try to mobilize people, we like to say, to put their love into action. And that enables us to power organizations that are really making a significant life-saving impact. And what that means to us is that they're stretching beyond belief. They're doing as much as they can with what they have. And some organizations, and if you're a very, you know, an organization that's been in this for a while and has done fundraising for a while, then stretch yourself and reach out. And we know we all do this because of our love for animals. And that's really our belief statement. We believe that love for animals really has the power to do incredible things. So before I go on, I'm gonna tell you how I sort of broke up this presentation. As Bonnie said, I worked at the Charlottesville-Albemarle SPCA. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about some just really, really basic principles that help me, you know, go in every day and keep moving forward. Because when I started in 2005, there weren't a lot of organizations that were actually achieving 90% or more save rate if you were the animal control shelter. So we were a nonprofit, but we had the contract where all animal control animals for the city and the county came into us. And the prevalent view was it's impossible for an animal control shelter to have a 90% or greater save rate. And so much has changed now, and it's so exciting, but I just want to give you that perspective first. So I'm going to tell you a few principles that help me. But because we've shifted so far beyond where we were in 2005, I did a quick survey of some of the leaders that I really, really respect. And I asked what they thought was important. And so I'm going to share those results. And it's a small survey because I really just wanted to pick those organizations where they really transform their communities. And then we're going to end and talk about, you know, how do we actually achieve this goal? And we're going to talk about the four-letter word called data, right? Because we can't achieve something if we can't measure it, okay? So with that, you know, I said we were going to talk about the what, who, when, how. I forgot exactly what we had in there. But for me, because the prevalent view was it is impossible, first and foremost, the most important thing was having the attitude of that it was possible, that we had to believe it was possible. You can never achieve anything if you think it's not possible. And really coming in with a passion to save lives. And I will never forget, I took the job in Charlottesville and I called up my sister. And my sister had been in Houston for years. And she had worked with rescue groups in Houston, and it wasn't a great situation there by any means. And I called her up and I said, you know what? I'm taking this job. It's an animal control shelter. They were still euthanizing 53% of the cats, but they were doing better on dogs. And they actually just even weren't celebrating how good were doing with dogs. I mean, compared to others. But I told her I was going to take this job, and she was so angry with me. She said, how could you take that job and be responsible for killing animals? And I'm sorry. I said I wanted to be responsible for saving them. And that drove everything that I did beyond that. And it's still really hard for me. So I think to do this, you have to have an incredible determination to succeed. And within a year, we had a 90% save rate. So the interesting thing, I sort of looked up relentless in the dictionary, and there was one description of relentless. And relentless is that, no matter what, it says that you mean business. That people are going to try to steer you away from that goal, but you won't be diverted from that goal. You are focused on that goal, and when things don't go right, you continue towards that goal with enthusiasm. And for me, that was the driving force, because let me tell you, things didn't go right, and they didn't go right a lot. But we had to keep moving forward. So you're wondering, what does this photo have anything to do with? It has nothing, but it is close to Halloween, and that's my dog Blueberry, and I think he's really attractive in a lobster costume. So had to stick him in there. So these were this is how. For me, it was all staying focused on the positive. When I started, everything was about, we can't do that, and it won't work because, we can't do it because. Everything was about what won't work. That really doesn't help you move forward. So we had a motto internally that said, solutions, not excuses. I had a motto with volunteers that came into my office every day with complaints, and I said, you can't come in to complain unless you have a possible solution. That actually cut off a number of complaints. And set audacious goals. We didn't come in there and saying, hey, we got a 53% euthanasia rate for cats. Maybe next year it'll only be 40%. We said next year we're going to hit 90% save rate. That's it. And you come in with those audacious goals, and you'll be amazed at what you can achieve. Guidelines, not policies. And I'll just be brief on this. Policies tend to be the reason to say no. Someone comes in and we say, oh, our policy is this, so we can't do that. So we shifted to basically guidelines. And our guidelines were, some basic tenets, but everything was guided towards saving lives. And that meant you could make exceptions to things if it would save a life. Lead by example. I still foster today. Bonnie told you I fostered, but when I started, I think within a couple weeks, I had a mother dog with a litter of puppies and then a litter of 9 puppies, and our board was up in arms. They were convinced they had hired an animal hoarder. But luckily, they got over that. Really encourage ideas and even encourage failure. And then top of the house accountability. At the end of the day, if you are leading an organization, you are the person that is accountable for what happens. And I think that's why I like the quote on the bottom, because sometimes it really means that you have to hide your panic from others, right? You're not sure if you're doing what's right. So let me just get an idea. Who is a CEO or ED? And I like to call, I think we should call them CEOs of animal welfare organizations, right? So who is leading an animal welfare organization in the room? Okay. And then just if you're just a manager, raise your hand. And so with all those, who must we lead? And it was interesting, I had a conversation in our office, and I said, if you were talking about leadership, what would you talk about? And this was with one of our managers. And everything was focused on how do we lead staff, right? Right, but do you think that's what we're leading? God, we're leading so much more. We are leading an entire community, because again, I'm going to get down to this. If all you are doing is leading your staff, you will fail, right? Because an organization will not solve the problem of eliminating euthanasia in our country. A community will solve the problem. And so we have to bring the community on board. And the interesting thing is, if you're an animal welfare CEO, executive director, Jim Collins wrote a book called Good to Great. Anyone read it, right? He also wrote, and leave your hands up if you read the monograph for the social sector. So this is Good to Great, and how do those principles apply in the nonprofit sector? And he said what was really interesting is the nonprofit leaders are required to get things done within a diffuse power structure. And what he meant by that is, there's one thing about leading staff, right? Staff reports through you. You actually have to lead your board too, and you actually report to them. You have to lead government officials. You may report to them. You have to lead the community, and they really don't have to follow you. So our leadership has to be done in a way where people follow us, even though they don't have to. And then finally, for me, it was all about priorities. And it's interesting, I saw on the survey, spay-neuter rated high, and we thought spay-neuter was really important too. But at the end of the day, spay-neuter it was resource intensive, and you had to do a lot before we saw that intake going down. And if you haven't fully explored your ability to increase adoptions, adoptions you can do with a lot less resources. In fact, you're going to bring adoption fees in. And foster homes. We talk a lot about capacity for care. In my view, your capacity for care is only limited by your ability to get, or your inability to get, new foster homes. Because your capacity should be the entire community. What's the percent of that community that you can get to foster animals from you? There's no reason they have to stay in the shelter. We can empower those fosters to actually do adoptions themselves. So your capacity is only limited if your thinking is limited and you're not reaching foster homes. But with respect to priorities, I'm going to mention one other thing, because this recently happened. I spoke to someone recently, and they said, we were talking about foster homes. And in Charlottesville, the first year I started, they had put 300 animals into foster care. Our intake was 5,000. Our community size was pretty small. It was 140,000. And they said, there's absolutely no way we can get any more animals into foster care. We've done as much as we could. There's absolutely no way. Next year, we had 900 animals into foster care. Year after that, we had 1,800. It always ranged from about 1,800 to 2,000 animals into foster care. 40% of our intake, our building couldn't hold it. We achieved this by expanding our capacity until we could and then increasing adoptions. And then that bought us the time to focus on the spay-neuter, the surrender counseling, and the other things down the line. So I really challenge people, because I was talking to this individual, and they were in a community with a size of millions. And they didn't even have, I think, 300 animals in a foster care every year. So I said, how can we get 140,000? They said, well, we need more marketing. How do I market? And I finally asked them, I said, well, this will give away the community area. I said, I'm in your community, and I foster for you. Guess why? Do you think your foster system is easy? Do you think it's simple? We started talking about it, and they recognized that it's actually easier to adopt an animal than it is to foster an animal in their organization. Then we started talking about, they were very proud of a program that they had when people brought in strays, to try to ask people to keep them until they could, open up some space, or the stray hold was over, and could they take care of them. And so people would bring in strays, and they would directly say, hey, could you just keep them in your care for a while? That was a good program, right? But when a foster came in, someone came in their building to help them. We had to do an orientation, there was paperwork, it was easier to find a stray and keep it in your house than someone who actually wanted to go into their building to foster. Now, does that make sense? Would you market that program at that point? So the discussion was, this is about priorities and doing things in the right timing, right? You first need to fix your system. I also found that when I started, everyone wanted us to raise more money. We were a broken organization, and they had just finished a fundraising campaign, and we had a brand new building that everyone thought was paid for. and it had a huge debt of $3 million. And it was a bigger building, and they had never any experience in raising the operational funds to do that. And it was go back to the government, get more funding. We were the least funded. Like if we had taken 5,000 animals, and our city and county gave us $200,000 to do that, which is incredibly low. They should have given us more funding. But we had just renegotiated the contract 6 months ago. So we held off on a lot of them. Like, we have to have something that we can fundraise for, and we can change these other things like adoptions and fosters quickly so people are proud of what we do and we can show results. We can't renegotiate a contract at the time when we just did it, and apparently poorly. I wasn't there at the time, but we negotiated, and we also didn't have the community's buy-in at that time to support that new funding. So we waited a few years, and unfortunately, when we really needed to increase the contract funding, what happened? The market crashed. They were cutting budgets across the board, and guess what we did? We got a 300% increase in funding that year. And then it went up to 4 times the next year and 5 times the next year, despite the fact that budgets were being cut every single place else, and the market had, because of the market crash. And the reason is because the community support behind us at that point, because we had achieved so much, was so incredible, they knew they couldn't say no. So it really is about priorities and timing, and really look at what you're doing when, and put some strategy into how you're going about it. So from here, I'm gonna switch over and talk about what do other leaders say. And these are leaders that I like to call life-saving champions, or those who are putting their love into action for animals. So some of them you're gonna hear speaking. Chelsea over there. Chelsea won an award. She won the PetCo the Kanawha Charleston Animal Society won the PetCo Foundation Paul Jolly Compassion Award because they were achieving incredible work. And you'll see, I think there's Gina down there too, getting a big check. Let me tell you, Front Street, if you guys aren't participating in our Holiday Wishes campaign, our Innovation Showdown, and all these things, you're just, giving Front Street more room to win it year after year. So they won our Holiday Wishes. Does anyone know what Holiday Wishes is? Raise your hand. This is a great campaign. You actually don't have to do anything. You just have to ask your adopters to submit stories about how their animals have changed their lives, and you can win $100,000, right? So I'd probably get involved in that if I was really relentlessly determined to save lives. Just saying. Okay, so I asked these, it was a really select group of leaders, and these are all people that were transformed their communities, that they didn't have a ton of resources, and yet they achieved remarkable things. Yes, but before, I want to give you an example of what remarkable looks like. And so we're going to watch a video about the remarkable work at the Kanawha Charleston Humane Society.
Welcome to Kanawha Charleston Humane Association. Here we pride ourselves in being different. We wanted to make this a place of community outreach, education, and we think we've been able to do that.
In 2012, KCHA's save rate overall was 35%. The perception in the community was the shelter was a place where dogs came to die, and they were right. So we really had to start completely over. We made a commitment to life saving, and we follow through on that every day.
We want to make sure that this is happy, that people are smiling, that even the paint on the walls is bright and cheery, because it is a happy place now, so come on in.
We offer pet retention counseling, positive alternatives to shelter surrender.
In 2012, our save rate in cats was just 8%. Last year, we were able to raise it to 88%.
We also have a behavior and enrichment team. Consisted of play groups, so every single dog gets out to play at least one time a day. The result of play groups, almost instantly, our length of stay for dogs decreased by half. Today, we are consistently saving 96% of dogs in our care.
It's very busy.
We added an in-house veterinary clinic. We are so excited to be able to offer in-house spay-neuter services.
We just are glad that we're finally being able to make a dent to do good things for this area.
The flood. I happen to live in the community that was flooded. I live in Clendenin, West Virginia.
First came the flash flooding, then came the flames, hell, and high water.
That flood changed everything about who we are. It's one of those things where you have no time to prepare. You just jump in and start helping.
We went in to try to set up an emergency base, and instantly people began bringing us animals who'd been in the flood.
We treated more than 2,200 animals, whether it be just transporting back to the shelter to board. We vaccinated. There are, of course, diseases and things that happen during natural disasters, especially during floods.
People whose homes were destroyed, and we would offer them pet supplies. And the first day, we single-handedly handed out 9,000 pounds of pet food to people in need.
That's the kind of difference that we want to make in this community, and we were able to that day. After the June 23rd flood, we knew that we had a need for some sort of mobile unit. We wrote a grant for $240,000, and we found out not long afterwards that we were awarded the entire amount from the PetCo Foundation. We're going to be able to respond to disaster situations, God forbid anything like that ever happen again, hold adoption events, perform community outreach, so go door to door and say, give me your animal, we're going to spay, neuter it, and vaccinate it. We'll be able to reach part of the population who maybe has never seen a vet in their entire lives, have never brought animals in. The caravan, as we're lovingly calling it, is going to be invaluable in this region. So this is probably the most meaningful room in our building. It reminds us of where we're never going again. If you look down right here, this is actually the line, the incinerator, where we euthanized right around 70% of our animals before the new administration took over. This is where it was. We're in a building where we now save lives. We just celebrated our 3-year anniversary of dismantling this incinerator. So this is what it's all about.
If a little shelter whose budget was less than $1 million in rural West Virginia can become a life-saving facility and sustain that and change their community, anyone can do it.
You guys, let's give her a round of applause. Chelsea, stand up again. Stand up. We want to say thank you again. Come on, Chelsea. Woohoo! So I think I could watch that over and over and still always have tears in my eyes. That's what it's all about. That's what we're here for. So I started with, and this is super interesting to me, I asked people what they did before they became the CEO of an animal welfare organization. And do you see what's missing from here? The fact that they actually worked in an animal welfare organization. Isn't that really, it's very interesting to me because, and listen, I'm not saying that there's not great leaders that are already in animal welfare. I am not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is we've got so many communities that have been transformed by people that have come outside into this field. And when we talk about, not preaching to the choir all the time, we need to expand our scope. Now, be clear, very small survey size, but I thought it was interesting because these are really some well-respected leaders. And the other category was things like retail, or people chose 2 options, like retail and government. Woohoo for the lawyers. Yeah, I know, I never get a woohoo back, I'm just saying. So government, marketing and communication. So I sometimes, I'd like to actually maybe expand this survey because this comes up so often when boards of directors are looking to hire a new leader and they're discounting people because they don't have animal welfare experience. And in my own case, I applied for at least 25 jobs. Some never responded to me, and I got a lot of rejection letters too. It was like I was coming out of law school again, and and then someone took a chance. So I asked everyone these different questions. How important are the following to life-saving success? And in many ways, it was an unfair question because a lot of the comments said, hey, all of these things are incredibly important. But still, just, the emphasis, and everything is really, with the exception of the defined policies, which I would have to agree with, everything is rated, average, above average, or well above average. So I'm going to look at the differences on just what was rated well above average. We talked about it. I found adoptions and open adoptions and flexible adoptions being a number one requirement. I am so thrilled to see the 91% on the two other things, and that's foster care. I actually spoke with that earlier, and data. So I sort of look at those, and those to me were absolutely crucial to our success. And because I think the data pushes you to even do more. And then, obviously leading by example, sense of urgency, I think is also super important too. And it's interesting to me, we can take some of our other PetCo and Foundation staff to various shelters, and we can walk in the door, and we know just by the sense of urgency that you feel when you walk in, what activity is going on, what's happening. If that organization is really making a significant impact and doing the most that they can. You just feel it when you walk in the door. I then asked, what are the importance of the following attributes, sort of honesty and integrity? And honesty and integrity, number one, right? Again, all of them are incredibly important. Your ability, your commitment and passion. It seems so simple, right? So basically, we just have to really work hard and be passionate about what we're doing. You can't get around that. You've got to inspire others. You should be a courageous risk taker, although don't take risks just for the sake of taking risks. But don't be afraid to take risks. Don't let fear stop you from accomplishing your goals. I love the comment that said thick skin. I actually think that's really important, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And sense of humor, that's super important, but also be humble. Don't think you know everything, and really, try to lean on your team too. So this is I'm trying to just look at the percentages of women versus men in the room, and this is not disparaging men in any way, but it's just quite frankly a fact that animal welfare has more, the industry itself has more women in it, right? I went to one of my first conferences. I had a friend that was volunteering. He was a gentleman, single, and I said, hey, if you want to meet women, come to the animal welfare conference with me. And he did, and I came down to breakfast in the morning, and there he was, him and 10 women at the table, and he's having a good old time. So, this field tends to be dominated by women. And so because confidence, I thought that was interesting on this, the answers here, that while everything's above average and well above average, confidence was not rated so high. So I want to share a couple things on confidence. And so I had the incredible opportunity to attend a Women Leaders in Retail conference, a conference that had nothing to do with animal welfare. And I had the privilege of hearing Sharon Prince Jones speak. She is the CEO of Build-A-Bear. And her entire presentation was about women and confidence. And this slide, when an endeavor goes wrong, women are more likely to blame themselves. When something goes right, they credit the circumstances. Men do the opposite. That was a slide from her presentation. So I'm going to read you some of these, and then I want to talk a little bit, because I've been really thinking about this a lot. And I'll be honest with you right up on stage here, that honesty thing is important. Haven't really figured out this whole concept of what I think about what's here as I compare it to animal welfare. So let's talk about a couple of things. Women underestimate their abilities and performance. I believe the stat was 50% of women underestimate their abilities and performance, and 50% of men will overestimate them. And this was, I believe, her discussion, and I don't have the exact details, was from a survey that was done, and it was talking about when, at least in the corporate world, when there was a new position that opened, women were unlikely to apply for it because they had to be 100% qualified or they wouldn't even apply. And men who weren't qualified, they got this. They're going to do this, no problem. Same with if there were projects that were coming up and they wanted someone to take on a new initiative. The men in the room that were probably less qualified, and again, I don't mean to be disparaging the men in this room, I'm so sorry, I'm just sharing information. They would likely raise up their hands, I got this, I'll take this on. And yet, the women in the room didn't. And it was a really interesting point she made. And has anyone read Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, right? So this was her advice to us. She's like, you know what? Don't lean in. She's like, step up. Step up and take on these opportunities that you are thinking that you're not qualified for. And what was really interesting to me, though, is if I think that may be the case in the corporate world, but when I look around me in animal welfare, what do I see? I see women stepping up. And so there's something different when we look at animal welfare, and I really believe it's the cause, it's the drive to help. But I'd love to look at all of these principles different, just like Jim Collins did from good to great on the corporate side to the social sector. I would love to look at these principles to see if those things remain the same in the nonprofit world. Because I do see women stepping up all over. And I don't even think they care if they have the confidence, because you know what? It really doesn't matter. Why? I think because we're driven to do something. And I shared this at one of our events, but I have a song that's one of my favorite songs, and it's called Do Something. And some of the lyrics are, if not us, then who? If not now, then when? It's time for us to do something. And I think that's really the driver in a lot of this. So another interesting statistic is women think too much. There are 30% more neurons firing at any given time. And again, the book itself, while I said I love simple leadership books, this one is not simple. It's called The Confidence Code, The Science and Art of Self-Assurance, What Women Should Know. So women think too much, but they think about the wrong things, right? They think about, did I do this right? Should I have done something differently? They do too much worrying, right? And I think that really can, just thinking about that, how does that impact us? There was also another example of internal versus external attribution. And this was from a study of math PhD students who took a test, and then they asked people on the outside, like, how do they feel about the test? And for the people that didn't do well. And the men that didn't do well on the test, they said, wow. That was a tough course, right? That was external. It's someone else's fault. That was really tough. What the women said was, oh man, I really messed that up. I wasn't good enough. That's the internal attribution. Like, we take it upon ourselves. And so, again, just been thinking a lot. I want you guys to think about this a little bit. I'd love to hear feedback from people. But, when I look at that, when an endeavor goes wrong, women are likely to blame themselves. And when something goes right, they credit the circumstances. I often think they credit others. And I actually don't think that's bad. I think it's actually really good. I think that is what accountability is about. It's about giving credit to others. And you are going to take the blame if something goes wrong, if you're the leader of an organization. But we have to protect ourselves. And maybe knowing some of these things, we can figure out, knowing that we worry too much, knowing that we just can't shut off our thinking. We have to figure out ways to sort of cope with all that. Or maybe now that you know it, just tell yourself to stop thinking, stop worrying. Don't just keep moving forward. There was one of the chapters in the book was called Think Less, Take Action, and Be Authentic. I think I would reverse some of those, and I would say take action, think less. So think before you take the action, but once you take it, think less about, did you do it right? Could I have done something differently? Just cut that out, and then just be yourself. So I don't know, just really interesting concepts that I wanted to share, and love to hear different perspectives on this going forward. But this is a topic that I really do want to think a lot more with respect to animal welfare. So I also asked the group, what resources would you recommend? Maddie's University and Maddie's Apprenticeships came up, several people. No louder applause. a number of books that were recommended, or as one person said, every book written by, or article written by Colin Powell. The New Best Friends Animal Services Guide that just came out recently. And again, find some peers. Bonnie talked about this a lot, but God, I needed Bonnie when we were going through this. I needed someone to talk to. And I thought what was so interesting is often, even though she was in Reno and I was in Virginia, in Charlottesville, Virginia, we were going through the same things. And it was really helpful to talk to someone about it. And then we started sharing things. Like if she did a marketing campaign that worked, I'm like, give it to me. The people in Virginia don't know you just did it in Reno, so let me use all your flyers. And we started sharing things that we could help one another out. And I think that is so, so important. And then one person, all the leadership TED Talks you can watch. So, okay, I'm gonna see if I can let's see if I can scroll through some of this. So this is a leadership TED Talk. I'll let him do the beginning, and I'm going to try to scroll through some.
This is really a 2-hour presentation I give to high school students, cut down to 3 minutes. And it all started one day on a plane on my way to TED, 7 years ago. And in the seat next to me was a high school student, a teenager, and she came from a really poor family. And she wanted to make something of her life. And she asked me a simple little question. She said, "What leads to success?" And I felt really badly because I couldn't give her a good answer. So I get off the plane and I come to TED. And I think, geez, I'm in the middle of a room of successful people. So why don't I ask them what helped them succeed and pass it on to kids? So here we are, 7 years, 500 interviews later, and I'm going to tell you what really leads to success and makes TEDsters tick. And the first thing is passion. Freeman Thomas says, "I'm driven by my passion." TEDsters do it for love, they don't do it for money. Carol Coletta says, "I would pay someone to do what I do." And the interesting thing is, if you do it for love, the money comes anyway. Work. Rupert Murdoch said to me, "It's all hard work. Nothing comes easily, but I have a lot of fun." Did he say fun, Rupert? Yes. TEDsters do have fun working, and they work hard. I figured they're not workaholics, they're workaholics. Good. Alex Garden says, to be successful, put your nose down in something and get damn good at it. There's no magic, it's practice, practice, practice. And it's focus. Norman Jewison said to me, "I think it all has to do with focusing yourself on one thing." And push. David Gallo says, push yourself. Physically, mentally, you've got to push, push, push. You've got to push through shyness and self-doubt. Goldie Hawn says, "I always had self-doubts. I wasn't good enough, I wasn't smart enough, I didn't think I'd make it." Now, it's not always easy to push yourself, and that's why they invented mothers. Frank Gehry said to me, "My mother pushed me." Serve. Sherwin Newland says, "It was a privilege to serve as a doctor." Now, a lot of kids tell me they want to be millionaires, and the first thing I say to them is, okay, well, you can't serve yourself. You got to serve others something of value, because that's the way people really get rich. Ideas. TEDster Bill Gates says, "I had an idea." Founding the first microcomputer software company. I'd say it was a pretty good idea. And there's no magic to creativity and coming up with ideas. It's just doing some very simple things. And I give lots of evidence. Persist. Joe Kraus says persistence is the #1 reason for our success. You got to persist through failure. You got to persist through crap, which of course means criticism, rejection, assholes, and pressure. So the answer to this question is simple. Pay $4,000 and come to TED. Or failing that, do the 8 things, and trust me, these are the big 8 things that lead to success. Thank you, TEDsters, for all your interviews.
So the interesting thing about that is, seems pretty similar to what we've been talking about all day long. All those principles are the same. Of course, it was Goldie Hawn that had the lack of confidence, right? Did anyone notice that? And, honestly, I could talk for 8 hours about the crap that you deal with when you're leading an animal welfare organization. My advice to you is do your best to stop focusing on the crap. It doesn't solve anything. If people are coming out and they're saying things, if there's some of those, the A word in there, right? I'm on tape, so I won't say that, but I did. If there's some of those in your community, don't give them power over you by responding, right? There are maybe some things that you have to respond to. But I see in this field more time spent on the crap than anything else. And what does that do? Relentless determination. It steers you away from your goal. Don't tell them they're wrong, prove them they're wrong. And you will get much more accomplished because you cannot change what other people do. The only thing you can change is how you respond to it. So that would be my advice with respect to that. I also asked our survey participants what they wish they knew about before taking on the role. Xanax. That then helps you deal with the nonprofit boards, the government politics, and everything else, right? And some advice, and I'm going to do what you're not supposed to do. Don't read from the slides, right? But this is really just some good advice. Don't be afraid to try new things, long shots, crazy idea. The magic happens when you aren't afraid to try. Be bold but thoughtful. Don't be complacent. Think outside of the box. Believe in your vision and keep your sense of humor. Trust others, take risks, trust people, tell your stories, strategy, focus, determination. This is what you all need to do. It's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, everyone would do it, but the hard is what makes it great. And I think there's so much great advice on this. And so at the end of the day, I'm going to quickly move on then to, let's just talk about one thing, and that's accountability, because we as leaders are accountable to saving the animals and eliminating euthanasia in this country. But let's be clear, we can't ever achieve that if we can't measure it. And I have to tell you, I'm really tired of estimating how many animals we're killing in this country. 2.3 million, 1.2 million, 600,000. We sit there and talk about the fact that every animal is precious. We should give every animal a chance. And then yet there's millions of animals out there that we're not counting. And we know the data. All of us has the data. So if you're a leader in Nevada, I'm going to charge you with something to do in this state. And that's put forth statewide legislation that requires statewide reporting of animal shelter data and results, because you cannot achieve a 90% save rate if you don't know what exists. You cannot save lives. So I'm going to give you, and I also think there's another reason for data that we'll talk about at the end, but I'm going to give you hopefully a quick example of why the data is so important and what it can do. So in 2005, Virginia, actually it was in 2004, but 2005 was the first time they had really good data. Virginia required all shelters, animal control shelters, municipals, nonprofits, rescue groups, it didn't matter. If you were an animal welfare organization taking in data, you reported it to the state vet. What came in, what went out. Very simple. And the state vet got so sick of getting all the FOIA requests for the data, what did they do? They said, here you go, you have it. They just put the numbers for each year. We asked them for the data. They gave us the data. We put it in a map. And let's look at how helpful it can be. So this was Virginia in 2005. All the red is you've got some places with a 0% save rate at that point. This is save rate. So if it's red, you're not doing good. It's not until you get into the lighter colors or the blues that you're getting higher save rates. That was Virginia in 2005. Look at what Virginia is today. Right? Pretty incredible, right? And now they know where they need to go, because they need to go to the communities. This is all the animals that are being euthanized. They need to go to these communities and help. So do we have a dog-cat problem in Virginia? Look at dogs. Pretty incredible, right? So what Virginia has is a cat problem. So Virginia right now has about an 86% save rate in the entire state. They know exactly where all the animals are coming in because they're required to report it. But it gets even cooler. Like you can get this data here is by organization. You can see every trend line by organization. You can look at other organizations that are successful and say, what are their trends and what did they do, so we can try to replicate that, right? So you can look at year over year what was happening in Virginia and how did they achieve that, increasing adoptions, decreasing euthanasia. But I'm going to show you something really cool, because I think, because data can also be used in your policy discussions, right? So in Virginia, I know one of the things that we hear a lot across, like if we save more animals, we're going to be placing aggressive animals, right? Because you achieve those rates, you must be putting aggressive animals out there. Well, as Virginia decreased its euthanasia rate, this is what happened to the bite cases that came in. Great charts that you can use in policy discussions too. There's absolutely, it just confounds me that we do not have this everywhere. It doesn't make any sense. People tell me that, well, there's small organizations, they don't have funding. Trust me, you got them in Virginia. This is not, if you don't know how many animals are coming in and what's happening to them, I think you should get out of the business. That is basic 101, right? And so finally, I'm going to end this by going back to the presentation, and I want you to listen from some of the Virginia leaders on what they say about how their data has helped.
We report shelter data because we're required to by law, first of all, but it's very important to us to keep up with their data, to determine how we're doing, and also to try and save more lives.
Having the data is vital to our organization. I would say that in years gone by, we had the data, but we were working so hard in the trenches that we didn't necessarily use it to guide our work. So now what the data does for us is we can laser focus where we go to work. We know where the problem areas are, and we can focus our resources on those problem areas.
The Richmond SPCA makes its intake decisions, prioritizing taking animals out of shelters all over the state of Virginia where we think their lives are most at risk. We especially focus on taking sick and injured animals because those are the ones whose lives are at the greatest risk. Using data to figure out where those needs are and where the most lives can be saved that would not be saved otherwise without our help is essential.
We brought in close to 1,000 animals from other facilities in order to try and reduce the euthanasia in some of the counties that don't have as much help or as many resources. Having it all in one big map and then seeing ranking of the organizations in regards to the amount of intake they're taking, we had no idea, even internally, that we were number 4 intake for the entire state. And that was remarkable to us because we are a public shelter and we always feel like we need to be doing more, and we probably can still do more. I would love to be number 1 with the highest save rate and the highest intake. However, that was a proud moment.
Russell County is in rural southwest Virginia, and our population is 27,000 people. 20% of the people living there are actually living below the poverty level. Data gathering is definitely critical because a lot of the people in my own county didn't even realize what was going on behind closed doors. Until 2015, our county's shelter euthanasia rate was 65%. And in 2015, I began working with the animal control officers. I sat down and I explained it to them and showed them how they compared to other counties within the area and, kind of presented to them, do you want to be the worst and continue to be that, or do you want to be the best in the area? So they said they want to be the best. They didn't know that there was another option, and it isn't fair to assume that they don't want to be part of the solution just because they've been doing things one way. Over the past 3 years, we've been able to reduce the euthanasia rate to less than 1%.
I think it's vital that all states report the data. Without knowing the animals exist, we can't know how to help them. If we don't know the animals are being euthanized, we can't change our ways. So data, to me, is the starting point for all of our work, and it's vital to just knowing what we know, and it's vital to managing and measuring our progress.
Data is the most powerful storyteller that you have. So this data from the PetCo Foundation is going to help tell that story.
So I'm going to leave you with the final thought is, I think leadership is just really about being determined. It's about being the best that you can be every single day. But what I think data does is it pushes you to be better. And so when you see the animals in another community that needs your help, you thought you were the best, you were saving them all in your community, now you're going to get the other ones. So thank you all, and let's create Nevada as a life-saving state.